Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world that is quick to fight, quick to react, and quicker to destroy. But history shows us that true power lies not in the sword, but in the strategy, not in destruction, but in discernment. We were not designed to be warriors of violence, but warriors of wisdom. And today I want to show you how you can win your battles, not with war, but with wisdom. Conflict is not new. It's as ancient as mankind. From homes to nations, from friendships to boardrooms, from spouses to strangers, battles are being fought every day. But what separates the wise from the wounded is this: understanding over reaction. You see, we are living in an emotionally reactive generation. We don't pause to ask why. We respond to prove how. We don't seek resolution. We seek revenge. But here's the truth: reaction may feel powerful in the moment, but only understanding brings peace in the long term. The wisest people in history were not the ones who had the loudest voices or the strongest armies. They were those who could pause, observe, and think deeply before responding. That pause, however small, is not weakness. That pause is wisdom taking the driver's seat. You must understand that every time you choose to react without thinking, you give your power away. You are no longer leading your mind, your emotions are. And emotions, though God-given, were never meant to be your master. They are messengers, they are indicators, but they are not leaders. When someone offends you, what is your first instinct? To retaliate. To defend yourself, that's natural, but the higher path, the kingdom path, is to seek understanding. Ask questions, ask yourself, why is this person acting this way? What pain might be behind this behavior? What lesson is hidden in this opposition? Sometimes the battle is not between you and them. It's between who you are and who you're becoming. Wisdom understands that not every battle is about you. Sometimes you're just standing in front of someone's storm. Sometimes you are a mirror reflecting someone else's brokenness. When you react, you make it about you. But when you understand, you become a solution instead of a spark. Now, I'm not saying to let people walk over you. I'm not saying to be silent in the face of injustice. But there is a difference between responding with anger and responding with authority. One comes from pain, the other comes from purpose. Wisdom is not passive. It is powerful, but its power is internal before it's external. Wisdom walks into a room and doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't need to swing fists. It carries presence, and presence is more persuasive than pressure. One of the deepest forms of maturity is learning to ask questions when you want to give answers. It is choosing to reflect when everything in you wants to react. That's not weakness, that's discipline. That's wisdom. Look at history. The greatest wars began not because of evil, but because of ego, the inability to understand, the unwillingness to listen, the pride that says, I must win. This is what destroys homes, friendships, governments, and generations. When you operate in understanding, you break that cycle. You don't pour fuel on fire, you pour water. You don't attack, you analyze. You don't judge, you discern. Let me be clear, wisdom does not avoid conflict. It navigates it. It doesn't pretend problems don't exist. It just chooses a better solution than shouting or shooting. Wisdom is surgical. It identifies the root before treating the fruit. If you're going to win your battles in life, in relationships, in leadership, in spiritual warfare, you must elevate above reactivity. You must lead with clarity, and clarity only comes when understanding is chosen over emotional impulse. The next time you feel attacked, pause, breathe, ask, what's really happening here? The pause is not a delay in your response. It is the preparation for a better one. Remember, reaction might win you a moment, but only understanding wins you the war. In life, one of the greatest sources of unnecessary conflict is the absence of clear purpose. People who do not know why they exist are easily pulled into fights they were never meant to enter. You cannot live aimlessly and expect peace. You cannot wander without purpose and avoid unnecessary war. A person without direction will fight over distraction, but purpose, true, deep, divine purpose, has a way of making you selective. Purpose becomes your filter. It tells you what to respond to, and more importantly, what to ignore. Purpose keeps you from wasting energy on battles that have no reward, no growth, no meaning. It teaches you to value your time, your peace, and your focus. Some people fight simply because they are bored. They argue not because they are right, but because they are restless. Restlessness is a sign of internal misalignment, but purpose gives rest to the soul. When you are in alignment with your calling, you don't have time to fight every opinion, respond to every insult, or prove every point. You know where you're going, and because you know where you're going, you don't need to stop and throw stones at barking dogs. A person of purpose is dangerous, not because they are aggressive, but because they are focused. They have no appetite for unnecessary war. Their battles are not for ego, but for assignment. They are not looking to win arguments. They are looking to complete missions. Purpose defines the terms of your fight. It tells you when to speak, when to be silent, when to act, and when to walk away. Let me tell you, if the enemy can't destroy you, he will distract you, and one of his most subtle weapons is offense. If you are easily offended, you are easily manipulated. But when purpose fills your heart, offense has no place to land. You begin to see that most people are reacting from their own wounds, not from wisdom. And that realization sets you free. Sometimes, peace does not come from avoiding confrontation. It comes from walking in your assignment. You don't always need to solve the world's problems. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone who misunderstands you. Some people don't need your response. They need your silence. Some situations don't require your energy. They require your absence, and only a person with purpose can make that decision with confidence. You were not designed to be a soldier in every war. You were designed to be a steward of your destiny. Stop answering every call to battle. Stop responding to every critic. Stop fighting for attention. When you understand your purpose, you stop chasing validation. You stop needing applause. You stop competing with everyone around you because you finally realize you were never in their race to begin with. Purpose births peace because purpose brings focus. And focus is the enemy of confusion. The moment you decide to walk in purpose is the moment you start shedding the weight of other people's expectations. It's the moment you stop performing for acceptance and start living from identity. And here's the truth. Some battles are loud, but they're not valuable. They look urgent, but they are empty. Purpose helps you tell the difference. It teaches you to walk past drama, past noise, past temporary emotions and towards something higher, something deeper, something eternal. When you know who you are and why you're here, you can afford to let some things go. You can afford to say, this fight isn't mine, my peace is too expensive, my time is too valuable, my focus is too sharp. You don't lose power by refusing to fight. You demonstrate wisdom by choosing where and when to stand. And so, when you feel pulled into a conflict, ask yourself, is this tied to my purpose, or is this a test to pull me away from it? That one question will save you from countless emotional scars. It will protect your energy, your relationships, and your future. Because at the end of the day, your purpose is not just about what you do. It's about what you refuse to do. And when you choose peace over pride, clarity over chaos, purpose over petty fights, then you have already won. Not by might, not by war, but by wisdom. Not every enemy comes to destroy you. Some are sent to develop you. One of the greatest truths wisdom reveals is this. The people who oppose you the most often carry the greatest potential to teach you something about yourself. Your enemy is often your assignment, not because you need to defeat them, but because you need to discern what they're showing you. We are quick to label people as enemies when they make us uncomfortable. When they challenge our opinions, question our position, or expose our insecurities, we call them threats. But many times these are not threats, they are mirrors, they are opportunities for refinement. They show us what still needs healing, what still needs growth, and where we still need to mature. If you're wise, you'll stop asking, why is this person against me? And start asking, what is this situation trying to reveal in me? That question changes everything. Because wisdom doesn't just focus on the attack, it focuses on the lesson inside the attack. The truth is, some of your greatest growth will come from those who resist you, the ones who frustrate you, who gossip about you, who doubt your vision. These are the people who push you toward excellence. They unknowingly sharpen you, discipline your emotions, and build your resilience. Without knowing it, they train your character in ways your friends never could. Your supporters celebrate you, but your enemies expose you. They challenge your assumptions, they question your motives, they reveal your pressure points. That's why you shouldn't always pray for them to go away. Sometimes you need to thank God for them, because they are helping to shape the strength of your soul. Think about it, the most iconic victories in life are never won in isolation. They are won in confrontation, but confrontation doesn't always mean aggression, it means clarity. When someone comes against you, it's not always an attack. Sometimes it's an assignment for you to clarify your boundaries, reaffirm your identity, or step into a higher level of discipline and purpose. The enemy comes to distract, but God uses even that for development. And wisdom knows the difference. Wisdom doesn't panic in the presence of opposition. It pauses, it observes, it asks, is this a setup for my growth? There are times when the person you are trying to avoid is the very person God is using to elevate you. Not because they are right, but because they are revealing what's still weak in you. Maybe your pride, maybe your insecurity, maybe your need for approval. That's what makes your enemy an assignment. They are unintentionally helping to pull out the parts of you that you haven't dealt with yet. The ones who reject you now may be the reason you reach your next level, because rejection leads to redirection. Closed doors create clarity. Betrayal exposes who really belongs, and while it hurts, wisdom doesn't waste that pain. It uses it, it processes it, it learns from it. Don't just pray for protection from your enemies. Pray for perception, because if all you do is fight back, you miss the purpose behind the pressure. Every enemy won't look like evil. Sometimes they look like a challenge, a rival, a competitor, but beneath that surface may be your greatest internal test. Will you react emotionally or respond with wisdom? And here's another truth. How you treat your enemies reveals who you are. If you become what you hate, you've already lost. But if you remain centered, grounded, focused, then you've already won. The battle wasn't about them. It was about you mastering your response. It was about choosing growth over ego, purpose over pride, destiny over drama. So the next time you find yourself face to face with someone who seems to oppose everything you're doing, don't just see an enemy, see an opportunity. Ask yourself, what is this person teaching me about myself? What part of me is being refined by this resistance? You may not like the process. It may not feel good in the moment, but later, when you look back, you'll see that some of your greatest development didn't come through praise. It came through pressure, and pressure, handled with wisdom, turns enemies into stepping stones. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. In a world that demands reactions, silence has become one of the rarest and strongest responses. But silence is not the absence of strength. It is the presence of control, and control is the evidence of wisdom. Too many battles are lost, not because the enemy was stronger, but because the response was weaker. Reacting quickly often feels like power, but wisdom knows that reaction without reflection creates more destruction. Silence, in the hands of the wise, becomes a weapon that dismantles chaos. It protects clarity. It defends dignity. We have been conditioned to believe that silence means weakness, that to be respected we must speak loudly, argue constantly, and prove ourselves endlessly. But let me tell you something powerful. True confidence doesn't compete for attention. It stands still in storms and lets character speak louder than noise. You don't need to answer every accusation. You don't need to respond to every insult. You don't need to justify every action. Sometimes silence is not surrender, it's strategy. Silence gives you time to process, time to understand, time to gather truth before releasing words, because words spoken in haste can never be unsaid. But silence can protect relationships, preserve dignity, and promote peace. Not everyone deserves a response. Not every situation requires your voice, and not every battle is yours to fight. Wisdom teaches you when to speak and when to stay still, and often, the higher the calling on your life, the more silence you must learn to carry. Noise surrounds the insecure, but silence surrounds those who walk with intentionality. When people misunderstand you, silence might be your greatest defense. When people betray you, silence might be your most powerful statement. Not because you are afraid to speak, but because you understand that explanation is not always necessary for elevation. Some people will never hear you accurately, no matter how clearly you speak, so choose your words like gold, and sometimes choose none at all. You don't always win by being louder. You win by being wiser, and wisdom doesn't shout to be heard. It listens to lead, it watches to discern. It responds only when response builds, not when it burns. In fact, sometimes your silence will confuse your enemy because they expected you to lose control. They expected you to explode. They expected you to fall into the same emotional traps. But when you stay calm, stay centered, stay quiet, you keep your power. There's a maturity that comes with knowing when not to speak. It takes strength to be silent when your flesh wants to respond. It takes growth to hold your peace when your pride wants to fight. And that kind of discipline doesn't come from weakness. It comes from spiritual strength. It comes from emotional security. It comes from a deep awareness that not everything needs your reaction. Think of how many conflicts could have been avoided if silence had been chosen in the heat of the moment. How many friendships could have been preserved? How many reputations protected? How much energy saved? Silence is not about cowardice. It's about courage. The courage to let your peace matter more than your point. Even in spiritual warfare, silence is a weapon. Sometimes God does more in your quiet trust than you could ever accomplish in your loud defense. Silence invites divine intervention. It opens the door for wisdom to take the lead. It removes your ego from the equation and allows truth to rise on its own. But let me be clear, silence is not always the right response. There are times to speak, times to stand, times to declare what is true. But if you speak every time you feel attacked, you'll waste your strength on enemies that weren't even worth your attention. Learn the rhythm of wisdom, silence to assess, words to build, and restraint to win. When used with discernment, silence becomes your shield. It protects what matters. It allows emotions to settle. It puts the burden of proof on the chaos, not on you, and in doing so, it proves that you are not just reacting to life. You are leading it. So the next time you feel the pull to defend yourself, to argue, to be right, ask yourself, is this a moment for noise or a moment for strategy? Because when you learn to use silence with purpose, you are no longer at the mercy of emotion. You are operating from a place of power. And that kind of power doesn't just win battles. It ends them before they even begin. We've been taught that strength is in power, in dominance, in how loud you can speak or how hard you can hit. But wisdom reveals something much deeper. The strongest person in the room is not the one who controls others, but the one who controls themselves. Real power is internal, not external. It's not found in the ability to overpower someone. It's found in the ability to restrain yourself when everything inside you wants to react. Self-control is not weakness, it's discipline, and discipline is what separates warriors from wanderers. You can train your hands for battle, but if you haven't trained your spirit for restraint, you'll destroy more than you build. There are many people with talent, with charisma, with influence, but no mastery over themselves. And when pressure comes, they implode not because they weren't gifted, but because they were undisciplined. Wisdom doesn't just teach you how to win, it teaches you what's worth winning. Some fights are not about the issue. They are about whether you've matured enough to walk away. You may be fully capable of crushing someone with your words, your status, or your knowledge. But if you crush them, what do you gain in a war where the price is your peace, your integrity, or your witness? Winning isn't really winning. Self-control is the decision to protect your future more than you satisfy your ego. There will always be opportunities to react, to defend yourself, to clap back, to show them who they're messing with. But wisdom reminds you, proving a point is not worth losing your position. Just because you can respond doesn't mean you should. Think of how much damage has been done by people who were right, but reckless. They had every reason to respond with anger, every justification to retaliate. But in doing so, they lost influence, relationships, and peace. Why? Because they let emotions take the wheel, and emotions are powerful passengers, but dangerous drivers. The battlefield is not always out there. Sometimes the greatest battle is within. Will you let your emotions rule you, or will you rule them? Will you let pride lead the way, or will you surrender to purpose? These are the decisions that determine whether you're fighting from strength, or fighting from insecurity. Some of the most difficult moments in life will be the ones where no one sees your restraint, where no one applauds your self-control, where you say nothing, do nothing, and walk away. Not because you're afraid, but because you're wise. That's real strength, when your spirit is louder than your ego. When your vision outweighs your vindication, and here's the truth, if you don't learn to master yourself, you will always be manipulated by others. Anyone who can trigger you controls you. That's why self-control is not just spiritual, it's strategic. It keeps your power in your hands. It stops you from reacting to every insult, every lie, every attack. Because if the enemy can keep you reacting, he can keep you distracted. Self-control teaches you the value of restraint, not because you're passive, but because you're focused. It's easy to explode. It takes no skill to lash out. But it takes maturity to hold your tongue, to still your hands, and to keep your mind clear under pressure. That's where your real growth is revealed. Not when things are peaceful, but when chaos comes and you remain grounded. Don't confuse being quiet with being weak. Don't confuse holding back with being helpless. It takes far more courage to choose self-control than it does to choose retaliation. Anyone can throw a punch, but only the disciplined can withhold one. Wisdom is not just knowing what to do, it's knowing when to wait and when to walk away. It's knowing that some battles are traps dressed as opportunities. They look like chances to defend yourself, but in reality, they are setups to destroy your credibility, your peace, or your influence. Self-control allows you to walk past those traps with your head high and your heart intact. And here's what makes it so powerful. When you master yourself, you become unshakable. People may try to provoke you, but you won't move. Circumstances may try to rattle you, but you'll stay grounded. You become a rock in the middle of storms, not because life is easier, but because your inner world is stronger. So if you want to win, not just today, but for the long run, develop the strength that no one sees. The strength to say no, the strength to be still, the strength to stay silent, the strength to walk away. That is where true victory lies, not in control over others, but in control over yourself. There comes a point in life when winning is no longer enough. The applause fades, the medals rust, the arguments end, and what you are left with is the impact of your choices. Legacy is what remains when the dust of the battle has settled. And if you are not thinking about legacy, then your victories are shallow, temporary, and easily forgotten. You can win every argument and still lose your influence. You can silence your critics and still damage your character. Victory in the moment may satisfy your pride, but it may also cost your peace, your relationships, and your future. Wisdom teaches us to pause and ask, if I win this, what do I lose in the process? Because the battle may end, but the consequences always continue. Legacy is not about who you impress in the moment. It's about who you impact in the long term. It's about what your children inherit, not just in possessions, but in principles. It's about the kind of name you leave behind. When people mention your name, do they remember fire, or do they remember fruit? Did you build, or did you just fight? Did you bring healing, or did you just leave scars? Wisdom doesn't seek victory at any cost. It seeks legacy at every cost. It understands that some arguments are not worth winning, because they drag your spirit into places that stain your integrity. You might prove a point, but you damage your credibility. You might win a battle on social media, but you lose respect in the eyes of those watching. What kind of victory is that? The wise person knows that every response is a seed, and every seed produces fruit. The question is, what kind of harvest are you planting with your words, your reactions, and your choices? Because legacy is not built in a day. It's built daily, with every decision to rise above what's petty and reach for what's permanent. Fighting for the sake of pride is easy, but choosing peace for the sake of legacy, that takes strength, that takes clarity, that takes the kind of self-awareness that says, I don't need to win this fight because I'm building something bigger than this moment. And that's where wisdom shines brightest, not in the heat of war, but in the discipline to walk away from it. You see, not all victory is progress. You can climb a ladder and realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. You can win debates that destroy relationships. You can conquer in the boardroom and lose in your home. Wisdom makes you ask, what am I building while I'm battling? Am I making enemies or multiplying legacy? Legacy requires that you choose long-term impact over short-term ego. It means choosing silence not because you're weak, but because your words are meant for greater things. It means choosing peace not because you fear the fight, but because you value what you're protecting. Your integrity, your future, your example. Every generation follows the tracks of the one before it. What footprints are you leaving? Are they filled with wisdom, honor, patience, and restraint? Or are they littered with the remains of unnecessary wars and ego-driven victories? People may not remember what you said, they may forget what you accomplished, but they will never forget how you made them feel and the environment your choices created. There will always be a temptation to win in the moment, to shut someone down, to walk away with the last word, but wisdom knows that the last word is not the loudest, it's the one that lasts. Legacy is not loud, it is consistent, it is honorable, it is intentional. You may be right, but being right doesn't always mean being wise. Sometimes the wisest thing to do is let go of being right in order to be righteous, to surrender your need to dominate and instead invest in what outlives you. That is what real strength looks like. That is what real leadership requires. So ask yourself, when this battle is over, what will be remembered, the noise or the nobility, the scars or the standard you set? The fight you won or the peace you preserved? Legacy is not built by proving you're strong. It's built by knowing when strength looks like humility, when power looks like forgiveness, when victory looks like restraint. And when the greatest triumph is not that you conquered others, but that you outgrew the need to. So after all the battles, after all the noise, after all the moments where you could have fought to be right, what will matter most is who you became in the process. You were not created to fight every war. You were created to win with wisdom, to lead with purpose, to rise above pettiness, to silence chaos with calm, to break cycles of reaction with the power of restraint. The world may glorify conflict. It may reward the loudest voice and celebrate the fastest punch. But heaven honors the one who walks in wisdom, the one who chooses legacy over ego, peace over pride, and purpose over petty victory. Never forget, real strength is not shown by how many people you can conquer, but by how well you can govern yourself. And the greatest battles you'll ever win are the ones where no one else sees you, but heaven does. The ones where you could have retaliated but chose restraint. The ones where you could have exploded, but instead elevated. So don't fight just to prove a point, live to fulfill a purpose. Don't just react to opposition, respond with insight. Don't let the need to win blind you from the call to lead, because when you fight with wisdom, you don't just win the battle. You transform the battlefield, and that, my friend, is a victory that will echo through generations.